APSA for allowing me to do this. It's been a struggle to get people in the association to realize that NSF is still out there for political science. And we fund in any area of political science at this point. So the more chances I get to say that, the happier I am. It's been interesting to hear a lot of my colleagues talk about their programs because there's a number of things that I go through, some that are different across, some that are the same. What I'd like to talk about briefly today is talk about some opportunities at NSF, but as I talk about those opportunities, I want to talk about the application process and essentially following the rules of the application process, because that can be very important. Now, sometimes I realize rules are very onerous. We try not at NSF to have them very onerous. We also try to be as flexible as possible, but there are some times that we can't be flexible. NSF, the process total is ruled by what's called the Grant Proposal Guide, which you can find on our website. It looks like this god-awful thing, especially if you print it out. It's pretty thick. But if you start looking at it, you realize fairly quickly, oh, that part is applicable to me now. Oh, that part's applicable to me. Oh, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about those 12 appendices there, and this type of thing. So it's real easy, actually, to use. Most competitions at NSF, that's the sole thing that really, or the basic competitions, I should say, that's the sole thing that guides the application process, is the GPG. And there are things in the GPG that you have to have, that say you have to have in an application. For example, for us, our evaluation criteria are intellectual merit and broader impacts. Just to note, broader impacts do not mean economic benefit to society. They're read much broader than that. And so you need to touch on those two topics, and we even tell you in the GPG that you need to be very explicit about what your intellectual merit is, what you see it is, and what your broader impacts might be. You have to have that there underneath headings. Now, some of us are a little looser when we do compliance checking about whether we say, oh, they don't quite have it under headings, but it's clearly there. Other people aren't, and that can get you in trouble with the process. Other competitions at NSF, now for political science, I should say, we have a general program description. So we don't have any additional rules for our general competition than those that are in the GPG. On the other hand, if you look at our solicitation, we have what's called a solicitation, I should say, for our doctoral dissertation research grants. Though that solicitation is a special document that's set up for that competition, and there will be changes that we will have in that document that aren't in the GPG. And you need to make sure that you're following those changes. For example, for our doctoral dissertation improvement grants, the PI is not the student. The PI is a faculty member. And so that needs to be there. The application must come through a PhD granting academic institution in the United States. So that needs to be there. There needs to be a letter from your chair. And we have a special form because we were getting letters that were 5 pages long talking about how great the student is. Now we have a letter that's very basic that they just fill in the student's name, the faculty's name, and they're essentially saying this student can do the work. Okay? So that's another way, that's a set of restrictions through a solicitation. I'm involved in another solicitation called Interdisciplinary Behavioral and Social Sciences. In that solicitation, we have additional merit view criteria. We want to, in that competition, we're talking about interdisciplinary work that pushes the boundaries in the behavioral and social sciences. So you're going to be evaluated on those criteria, and we want to make sure that you're setting that out in your proposal. So that has to be addressed right up front in your proposal. The third way that things come through NSF is through what's called a Dear Colleague letter. Most Dear Colleague letters are advisory of nature, and this is where program officers sometimes signal, oh, we're interested in a certain area. You don't see, well, you see that sometimes, for example, in the social and behavioral sciences. The law and social science program officers put out a DCL on forensic science, saying that they're interested in getting more proposals dealing with forensic science. That's not to the exclusion of everything else, realize. But you see it in a lot of the other sciences out there. I'm involved in a mechanism right now called an Inspire mechanism, which is a possibility where a scholar can get, or a group of scholars can get $1 million without going through peer review for interdisciplinary research that's on the cutting edge, but it has to be across the directorates. It can't just be SBE related, social, behavioral, and economic sciences related, or engineering related, or math and physical science related. It has to cross these. And we've seen some interesting partnerships there. But there are specific rules spelled out in the DCL of how you're supposed to proceed. And if you don't proceed that way, I don't want to say your application is going to be thrown out, because a lot of times it isn't. A lot of times we have flexibility. But there are some cases where we don't have flexibility. An example of that, and what I'll end up on, is talking about career proposals. Career proposals is a special solicitation. It's one of the few solicitations we have at NSF that are connected to junior faculty members. There's no connection to age. It's just you can't be either an associate or have tenure by October 15th of the year that you apply. These are 5-year grants, $400,000. They have very specific rules and a very strict target date. And if there are problems in your application, the application 90% of the time will be returned without review, which is not something that program officers like to do. I hate doing that. But there's not much we can do because we don't have control over that program. So the key, I guess, what I want to tell you is you really need to make sure that you're following whatever rules are set out for you. Now, how do you find out about those rules? You check the websites. There's a lot of information there. You can check with program officers. You can use your Office of Sponsored Research at your institutions. They should be great resources for you. Okay? All three are accessible. Program officers are more than willing to talk to you. Your Office of Sponsored Programs people should be more than willing to talk to you about these things. And they smooth the process over so you don't get caught in something and have to sit there for a year or 6 months before you apply again, even though you have a great proposal, but you forgot to check box 1 or box 2.